All right, are we ready to go, Steph? Okay.
Awesome. All right, and then I call this meeting of the traffic.
Not yet. We're still. Oh, now we're streaming.
We are? Okay.
We are good to go. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Third time's a charm. Let's call this meeting of the Traffic Safety and Parking Commission of the City of Burlingame, August 13th, 2020, call to order. Do we have anyone in the Wetton family that will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance today? All right. Do we have a flag that we are going to pull up? Oh, thank you, Commissioner Martos. Excellent. All right. And then let's see, Jeff, why don't you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner Martos. I'm glad you were prepared. Let's move to roll call. I think Lily, are you?
Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Commissioner Bush.
Present.
Commissioner Launder.
Here.
Commissioner Martos.
Here.
Vice Chair Wetton.
Here.
Chair Israelite.
Here. Okay, we moving on to item number 4, where there's no minutes to approve for this meeting. We'll do that in the September meeting. So we move now to item number 5, public comments. Members of the public can speak on any item not on the agenda. Mr. Wong, should I still read this even though I don't?
Yeah, you don't have to, but I would like to read the new meeting rules that we have, or the ones that we've been having. So for tonight, for any members of the public, please keep yourself muted and your video turned off unless you're speaking at the appropriate time. And there are 3 ways that you may communicate if you wish to speak. One is to email it to publiccomments@burlingame.org. We will read it, but we will keep it within the 3-minute time limit. Next is the Zoom chat feature, where you can press that and then type it in. And again, we will read that, again, limited to the 3 minutes. And the last one is you may raise your hand and we will let the chair know. And then you can be called on and then have your 3 minutes via Zoom. With that, that's it. And we have some public comment, but it's related to an item that we'll
Okay.
to you.
Okay, but we do, I think, have a guest that wants to speak during the public comment section. So Mayor Emily Beach is with us tonight, so it's yours.
Thank you, Chair Israelite. Good to see everybody. Thank you for giving me 2 minutes. I won't take too much of your time. As I mentioned in an email to you, I'm trying to do my rounds. I was doing them in person to all the various commissions this year. Unfortunately, Thursday nights are always a challenge for me with transportation meetings at the regional level. I haven't made it yet to Teaspoon, so I'm coming virtually tonight just to say a huge thank you to all of you for the great work you do. You know, it's near and dear to my heart particularly. And there's a lot going on in the city when it comes to traffic safety, parking commission issues. And I know how hard you're working. We appreciate the feedback we get as things filter up to council. Whether it's Lion Hogue or whether it's the current bicycle pedestrian master plan that we're working on. I just had the opportunity to listen into the BPAC meeting tonight that preceded this and with your Teaspoon reps. So thank you all for the great work you do. I'm happy to always be a resource whenever I can. I hope it's okay. I'll probably listen in tonight just to listen and learn. There's some interesting things on the agenda. Don't mind me. I don't want to be an active participant. That's your work. I'll have a time later on, but I always learn a lot from members of the public and from commissioners when I can listen and participate. And I do watch your meetings sometimes that are recorded when big issues come up. So thank you again for the great work you do, all the time you put into the city. It's tremendously appreciated.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us this evening. I know we were life was normal until mid March, so we totally understand. Are there any other members of the public that have comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, let's move on then to our discussion action items. So the very first thing is community BPAC update, which is an informational item only. Mr. Wong, tonight, do we want to just roll that into the discussion of the bicycle pedestrian master plan update, or is there something specific that you want to have Ms. Beatty speak to us about?
You know, if Ms. Beatty has something other than that, I'll leave it up to her.
I don't.
Okay.
So we can, yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ms. Beatty. Okay, then let's move straight into the meat of the matter, which is the long-awaited bicycle pedestrian master plan. We all received that, I think, or at least the link to the website on Tuesday, but many of us haven't really had a chance to study it or go through it in depth. So Mr. Wong is going to lead us through this.
Well, actually, we'll turn that over to Alta, but
Alta.
Want to let you know, the link was just sent to you as well as the BPAC. It's not live to the public yet. It won't start until I believe it's August 20th. We can make some tweaks, minor tweaks, if that's some of the feedback from tonight, and it'll be online for 2 weeks. But what we want to go through is I kind of poll each of you that if you've gone through it, there's a section in Otto's presentation that either goes through the virtual open house or jumps directly into the corridors, but we'll do the entire thing because it sounds like some of you were able to touch it but not get into it, get your hands dirty. So we'll go through the whole thing. So leading this effort from our staff is Transportation Engineer Michael Sy, who's been working with Alta Planning and specifically Otto Malera. And they've put together this, and again, this virtual open house was supposed to be an actual meeting, physical meeting. So this was kind of put together quickly on the fly within the last short period. So it is what it is, and it's pretty good. It does walk you through. For those of you who've gone through it, you've experienced it, and we enhanced it a little bit with a little bit of audio just to walk people through it, much like we did with the roundabout. So we're happy about that, but I will turn it over to Otto, and he will, let me share screen. Hopefully I can do this right. I'm going to need Lily to do that. Lily? All right, we'll have that up in a second, Otto.
All right, I'm on it.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Otto. I'm a project manager from Alta Planning and Design. I have presented to you before, and I recognize a lot of people here. So thank you for giving me the time to give you an update on where we are on the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. Focus of today's presentation is to present to you not only the draft network recommendations, but also the virtual open house and the study corridors, which is really a deep dive into different alternatives for how we can design some corridors that the public have really commented on throughout this process. So just really quickly, in terms of the approach that we've taken, right now we're in the draft recommendations part of this chart, where we have already looked at existing conditions, the needs analysis, and we've continued to engage with the public throughout this entire process. We really value the input from Burlingame residents, and we've seen a lot of residents come in person and in the virtual realm to provide input. So it's been really great to have that level of participation. And once we get more input on this next set of recommendations, we'll be in the final recommendation set, and then we'll be that much closer to prioritizing projects and creating that draft and final plan. And of course, the public will be engaged and has continued to be engaged throughout this entire process. So just at a high level, really quickly, kind of the themes that we've used to get to our recommendations are based around connectivity and improving connectivity for bicyclists and pedestrians throughout the city, improving neighborhood accessibility and providing more low stress routes for people, and especially kids and people of all ages and abilities, making crossings more comfortable, and allowing people to access major destinations like schools and parks and downtown and transit stations, and also addressing some safety concerns that have come from previous collision data. So that these are all things that we've analyzed, and we've also presented that to you in the past. In listening to the community, you know, we've talked to the community at farmers markets back when we were able to do engagement in-person workshops and virtual workshops. And these are kind of the top 10 corridors that are just spoken about the most. You know, they're not in any particular order, but, you know, it's clear that people in Burlingame, you know, feel strongly about California Drive, the Bay Trail, Rollins Airport, and all these other corridors. And so we hope to address a lot of their concerns with our recommendations. So moving into the draft recommendations, you know, before I jump into that, just kind of a quick like cheat sheet of what I'll be describing. So to the left here, you see, you know, a bike route, which we call a class 3. But it's basically, you know, a sharrow or a painted stencil on the ground, and then you have a bike lane, which is a painted bike lane, separated bike lane, which you see here. It's, you know, separation between bike lanes and vehicles, bike boulevard, buffered bike lane, and a trail. So these are how we have made these recommendations. This is currently what we have and what you have today as far as your existing bikeway network. You have about 27 miles of bikeways, consisting of trails, class 2, buffered bike lanes, and sharrows, class 3. These are our improvements. So this is in addition to the existing network. Some additional things that you'll see here that aren't there now are these purple lines, which are bicycle boulevards. And what bicycle boulevards are basically streets that have that can be implemented with traffic calming measures or traffic calming elements that make it safer, more comfortable, and a much more you know, pleasant environment for cyclists to bike along without really changing much of the geometry of the road. It's you know, think about adding a bulb out or you know, adding street trees or green infrastructure, or mini traffic circles. There's a whole suite of options. And then you also see some blue lines here, some dark blue, which are class 4 or separated bikeways. And you may also see black dotted lines. And what black dotted lines are study corridors. And so for this plan, these are a set of corridors that have many different ways to design and to get, you know, like a really desirable outcome. And so rather than just make an executive decision on these recommendations for these corridors, we decided to take a microscope into these corridors and provide different alternatives so that the public and stakeholders can essentially vote on a conceptual design, not a like a final design, but kind of how they feel, or like what they think the look and feel should be of this street. And just to go back, you know, that we've made 27 miles of recommendations. So this is what the total network, the complete network would look like with existing and proposed bikeways overlaid on top of each other. So it'd be about 42 miles of total bikeways, consisting all the way from, you know, your existing class 3s to bike boulevards to separated bike lanes, trails, and standard bike lanes as well. Moving into the pedestrian realm, we've made a lot of pedestrian spot improvements. And the way that we've made those is basically based on this matrix that you see. So depending on the type of street, whether it's an arterial, collector, local road, or high volume pedestrian area like Broadway or Burlingame Avenue, there's different traffic calming measures or different, I guess not traffic calming measures, but enhancements or countermeasures that can be that are appropriate for that type of street. And so that's what we've shown at the top here. All these different types of improvements that can be made. And what the check marks signify is where they are applicable on what type of street. So then what we're showing you here are all the different spots where pedestrian improvements have been made in this plan. And we've broken it down by improvement types, different, rather than listing off every high visibility crosswalk or every curb extension, because for a particular spot, it could get pretty lengthy, depending on how many recommendations we're making there. We decided to break it down into these rings that describe the type of improvement. And those types are crossing improvements, signal improvements, streetscape, and sidewalk improvements. And so it sounds like some people are familiar with the website. And if you go on the website and you click on one of these improvements, you'll actually see what the actual recommendation is. And that actual recommendation is, the lengthy, I guess, terminology around what we're recommending, not just these kind of broad improvement types. And then, kind of zooming out a little bit, what we try to do here is designate some pedestrian corridor types so that, the city and we can make appropriate enhancements or recommendations based on the type of corridor that's there. So, we've designated whether a corridor is an arterial, collector, local, or high pedestrian. And so this can be used with the toolkit that we provided earlier to really, kind of start to understand like where additional improvements can be made if necessary. So in summary, there's about 64 intersections of recommendations in the city. And within that intersection, there's multiple, there can be multiple improvements. And then there's 12 pedestrian priority corridors that we also highlighted. So I'll pause right here, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. My next slide was to go into the open house and give everyone a tour of what that experience will be like during the 2 weeks that this is open.
So through the chair, I have a question. Do I have the floor? Hello.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yes, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Otto, I found your preliminary slides here very helpful. At the open house, or actually I guess there won't be an open house where people will attend. Is it possible to make those slides available as part of this package as well?
The slides that I just presented make those part of this open house?
Yep, because I found some areas in what you're coming up to, this survey was lacking some information that just confused me, and you just filled in a bunch of it, good information from your slide deck. Maybe when I get to my comments, it'll make more sense, and you can maybe augment the open house slide deck or the open house presentation with some of the information from your slide deck.
Okay.
Anyway, just hold that thought. Hold that thought.
Right.
I'll tell you where I was having trouble following things, and I thought things might have been a little more clear. So, okay, you just hold that thought.
Okay, anybody else have any burning questions, or should we move to the open house? Let's move to the open house.
Okay, great. So I will share the open house screen. Okay. Can you see the open house, the virtual open house? Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, we are in COVID times right now, and we've had great success in Burlingame with the in-person open houses. We've received a lot of people coming out and giving us feedback that way. Fortunately, that's not available to us, but we did create this virtual open house so that people can hopefully have the same experience of walking through an auditorium where we're presenting all this information in kind of a guided way. So the reason I say that is because it's more than just a website. It's this like virtual experience that we want to guide people through. And we've worked with the city hand in hand too on all of these different elements. At the beginning here, we have information on what this is and where we are in the plan and what we'd like to get from people. The city provided us with an awesome how to use this open house video that actually walks you through and kind of shows you all the different features and all the clicking abilities and all that and how to leave input. I won't play that because there's like a Zoom discrepancy when you show videos over Zoom. But if you want to check it out, go check it out. I think it was made live yesterday, so you may be able to see it. So before you enter, we do ask that you leave us your name and your email. The reason why this is important is so that we can associate any comments that you make with your name and email. But also at the end of the open house, you can choose to print or save a log of all the comments that you made. And that's kind of based off of, us, of you providing basically a login, which is your name and email. So that's a pretty neat feature. So, at the intro, we have just the high level plan goals that have been, that we've drafted for this plan. And a lot of these goals have come from discussions with BPAC, discussions with the public, and from our own analysis as well. And kind of reiterating some themes that, that we've heard from everyone, from all the different stakeholders, and just kind of highlighting how important the residents have been throughout this process and how important everyone's input has been. And that's ultimately what has led us to understanding, the very important themes that need to be addressed. And then just more information on those themes, like what we heard and what some of the main takeaways are. Those are all described here. So now at this point, we're ready to review the recommendations. So we give a little background behind what you're about to see, and also a little link here to show you, to give you basically just a quick 101 of different facility types. So when we say class 1 shared use path, this is an image of what we're describing. Class 2, this is California. Class 3 signed bike route, it could be a sign or it could be Shero, etc. So we're hoping to just educate people, in case somebody doesn't know this terminology or what we're about to describe. A neat little info sheet on bicycle boulevards and their benefits. Different types of bicycle boulevard treatments. So from things like signage and pavement markings to speed management and traffic calming and volume reduction. Similarly, a pedestrian facilities toolkit. So we chose these based off of the most common recommendations that we made in this plan. I mean, this can be an endless toolkit, but what we showed is really what you're expecting, what we expect you to kind of get out of this plan. And so that's kind of the quick 101. Now it's time to jump into biking projects. So here's at the very top left, we give a description of what you're about to go through. And first up is a study corridor tour. And so the study corridor tour is to kind of walk you through several major roadways within the city and all the different types of bicycle facility options that we'd like people to consider. So first up is Rollins Road. Here in the map, this is the highlighted segment, and this is the highlighted project that we're showing. When you click on this image right here, this is a design concept cut sheet where we describe the 3 different alternatives for adding bicycle facilities to Rollins Road. The first being existing, of course, so that would be kind of your do nothing, right? Existing right now is 1 bike lane in the southbound direction and a Sharrow or a bike route in the northbound direction. But then we also provided a way to install separated bikeways in both directions. And in this case, they're both protected from moving traffic, not only with a raised delineator, but also with parking. So parked cars actually provide that safety net between cyclists and vehicles as well. And so here's a way to do it with, with basically 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane. And here's another way to do it with 4 traffic lanes, which means little to no impact to the existing conditions. Because right now you have 4 lanes of travel. And in this third scenario, you maintain your 4 lanes of travel, but what you get rid of is parking. On the right hand here, there's a lot of information that can be extracted from this. And so what we try to do is consistently tell that story of what this option represents and how these options, can be, what the trade-offs are basically. So that's what we're hoping to relay to people here. So after you spend some time kind of looking over these and understanding, the trade-offs and how all the 3 alternatives work, we ask that you vote on your top choice. So you can vote on your top choice here. I'm just gonna say, I'll say separated bikeway. And there's also a slide scale of, and this is gathered data as well. We asked the question, do you feel like this project would adequately enhance your experience as a cyclist? So you can say not at all, let's say somewhere in the middle, say neutral, or very. I'll just, I'll do this. Well, actually, I'll do this. And then we also ask, what's your second best choice? So you can say, well, I like this as well. And then we ask the same question. And then if there's any additional thoughts, if we maybe left something out that's not on here, you can share it here. So you could say something like trail. I want a trail. So you save your comment. And now you can go to the next project. And so we're guiding you through all of these corridors. Next project. And the final, at the end of this tour, which is, I believe about a dozen or so corridors, we ask that you roam freely and review all the other locations. So I guess at this point, Oak Grove, let's just say I'm gonna leave some comments here. We were basically saying, okay, so you're done with the corridor tour. So you can continue looking at other projects. You can roam freely. You can go to pedestrian projects. Or just look at the map in general, or you can even take a survey. So what does this look like if you click on a non-corridor project? Well, we can click on this, which is Paloma. We give you a description of this, which is Bike Boulevard between Carmelita and Oak Grove. You can click on this image to, get a feel for what we're really trying to describe here. You can leave more feedback, save your comments. So you can continue, clicking around, or you can go to pedestrian projects. So these are all the pedestrian projects that we've recommended. If you click on one of these, let's say here, Carolan and Morel. So here's the recommendation at Carolan and Morel. It's to upgrade the crosswalk across Morel Avenue to a high visibility crosswalk. And, you know, we still want comments from you. And if you want to leave additional comments, that's great. So you can do that throughout all of these projects or recommendations. Some are longer than others, like California and Oak Grove. You can see that there's more to this recommendation. If you get confused on some facility types, or if we said something here that you just don't remember what we were describing, you can always go back here to facility types at the top right and kind of take that 101 again and kind of get an understanding for what some of these facility types are. So say you've gone and done all this, and you found your top projects and you've commented on them. The next thing is to take the survey. So the survey is accessible here on the top right corner. It's an embedded survey through SurveyMonkey. And so what we're asking here is to understand a little bit more about people's priorities, so that once the final recommendations are made, we know how to prioritize them based on what the public and stakeholders have said. So first up is safety. And so we ask people to rank all these different factors of safety based on most important to least important. So you can either click 1, 2, 3, or you can move this around. It's like a neat feature. So level of traffic stress recommendation is a low stress facility or collision history. Next, we go to connectivity. We ask people to rank these factors that are connectivity factors. So whether connectivity across El Camino or 101 or the Caltrain tracks are more important, etc. So let's just do, okay, next. Same thing with accessibility. We want to hear what you have to say about accessing certain locations. Of course, feasibility is a factor in finalizing and making recommendations of projects. So depending on the cost of the project, if it's a short-term or long-term project, or the complexity. And to give an example of complexity, when we say multi-jurisdictional projects, that would be, if something has to involve Caltrans, like El Camino Real, because that's Caltrans right of way. Or if it's a road diet, because removing a lane of traffic to add bicycle facilities, also known as a road diet, would involve a little bit more traffic analysis as well. And then lastly, we ask people to rank their study corridors from highest to lowest priority. So these are all the corridors that we went over. California, we dissected into different segments, but to kind of keep it simple, we decided to keep it all as one corridor. And so you can say that Broadway, is your fourth choice. You want California as one, and you can do that. So you've taken the survey. You can, here at the bottom, see a summary of your comments. And people can choose to print PDF this if they like, or screenshot it. You don't have to. But this is what we'll see on the back end, and what's going to help us collectively make an informed decision, kind of to get us to the final recommendations. And that is the end of the virtual open house. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for putting that together. I'm sure that was a lot of work to have to sort of devise a whole new website just to present this to us instead of doing it in person. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. Why don't we go through the commissioners one by one? Commissioner Martos, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Otto, I really do like this survey and this website. I didn't go through in detail all the recommendations, but I do have some comments. So I want to start with the YouTube video. I thought that was very well done. I like that. Really guided me through the survey and what was coming up next. Something that I saw in the video and also it carried over into the survey, is it showed an example of Rollins Road and the street mix, and there was a color code legend there, or there was a color code for the different options, and I'm not seeing it on my screen, but at first I thought, do the colors represent anything? And then I realized that they don't. So I don't know if you have any considerations there, but the colors kind of threw me off. I was looking for a legend. So that's the first thing I'll say. But actually, I thought the video was really well done. And then I went on to the survey, and these are suggestions that I thought that might make it a little more clear to a person just seeing the survey for the first time. As I went through the different routes, at the top level, there's a lot of data for both the bike routes and even the pedestrian projects, the bike project and pedestrian projects. A lot of data to digest. It's hard to sort it. In my view, it was hard to sort it all out. One thing that I thought about was I've seen charts with, like, if you look at the police crime statistics, you can turn on and off different things. You know, there's ways, there's layers that you can turn on and off. So if this survey would allow me to turn on like class 1 routes or class 1 and class 2, so that I could start seeing things individually, that might help me visualize what was going on. Another consideration that I saw, or another thing that I saw that might help is, like you just mentioned, some of these roads, California Drive in particular, are dissected into a lot of pieces. There are like 6 pieces there. On the charts or the survey, you might put 1 of 6, 2 of 6, 3 of 6. I wasn't sure where it was going to end. Same thing with Truesdale. I think there were two plans for Truesdale, or 2 pieces of Truesdale, maybe 1 of 2, 2 of 2. And then I was trying to visualize how these pieces come together. And so if there's a way that you could show how those all integrate, and does the road change or the route change between the different segments? You know, Truesdale might be a little easier because there's only 2 segments. California, there were 6 segments that were presented, and 6 things that people were trying to consider. How all those pieces come together. If I'm riding a bike and I would like to know how those segments are going to change so I can make a decision which one I like best, it just might be easier to see that. The other things, now I realize that it's up to, you know, whatever we choose, but something that would help people visualize that. I was looking at El Camino Real, and you highlighted the east route. There were 2 that paralleled El Camino, one on the east, one on the west. And it looked to me like the east one was highlighted in yellow, but in parentheses it said El Camino Real West. So I wasn't sure if that was a typo or if I just misread it, but that was a little deceiving to me, or a little confusing to me. And then something that you mentioned in your opening slide deck is there were, the things in black were studied, or routes that are still being studied. When I read that, when I saw study, I was under the impression that those were the only routes that were being studied and recommendations were being made for those routes only. So maybe you could put further study or future study or more detailed study or something in front of study, because I was a little thrown off. I thought the black dotted routes were the ones that you were making recommendations on, or we were going to make recommendations on. Let's see. So that was the bike survey. On the pedestrian side, same kind of idea. There were a lot of, boy, there's a lot of data there. And I'm not really going to poke each one of those little pedestrian symbols to see what's going on there. So it would be nice, like you had a legend for the bike routes, if there was a legend for the pedestrian recommendations. I think you showed those in your opening slides. There were like 5 or 6 of them. And if there was some sort of maybe layering tool, or you could turn on different layers to see the different recommendations, whether it's a crosswalk or something else, that might help people visualize this and comprehend and digest all this data, chunks at a time, smaller chunks at a time. Let's see, other things. Oh, and on the pedestrian project, I didn't see that legend for the pedestrian options, and I didn't. There were the bike facilities. I wasn't sure whether those were existing bike facilities or recommended bike facilities. There was that legend there, so those are a couple things that kind of threw me off. That was all of my thoughts. I really do think it's a very good survey. It's just a lot of data to digest. It would take a really diligent, dedicated person that has a vested interest in this, a bicyclist or somebody that wants to be a bicyclist, or others, to really put in the amount of time to, I think, go in and analyze all this stuff and absorb all this data and then take the survey. So I'm just looking at ways to make it a little simpler for people to digest the data. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I'm glad that you had a chance to really go through it a little more thoroughly than I think some of us others did. But Commissioner Bush, do you want to ask questions next?
Sure. Thank you. I really appreciate the effort that's gone into this and all the work in getting this together. And I'm really excited to see this bicycle and pedestrian master plan come to fruition. I guess I had a few questions. So in particular, where we're calling out the study routes, how does that impact our ability to potentially apply for grants in the future, knowing that some of these study routes are some of the most important and critical pieces of the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure going forward?
It would be very beneficial to have at least concept level plans developed after this stage to apply for grants. It would be very helpful.
Got it. But I guess the question is, like, if we don't have a stake in the ground at this point, does that necessarily entails that we have to go through that additional step before we have something that's grant ready?
Through the chair?
Yes.
I can go ahead and answer that. So for this is the higher level that we're looking at planning effort. For some of these, even as it's going to appear from the comments from BPAC, say California Drive, we're still going to have to dig down and do some additional work on that. I mean, we'll identify a project, take it to council, see if we can get funding to go enhance that further. Because right now, this is pretty much what you're going to get. There are no plans coming out of this. That said, when we go through some of these grant applications, there is the possibility of having that part, not just the construction, but having the outreach, the design of final plans as part of the application.
Got it. Okay, cool. I guess the question is, like, do we anticipate that? I mean, I guess I would anticipate that that California in particular is called out as sort of like the central element to this overarching plan that lists out the criticality that would then like sort of give us some additional teeth for applying for some of those planning grants. correct?
Absolutely. I mean, you've heard every time we've gone for a grant application in the past, we haven't had, we haven't had to be able to cite a bike ped master plan. And so this helps us, as well as, whatever else we can use, like the county's going through theirs, and we can cite, we cite all sources that we can, but it's definitely much stronger if we have our own plan.
Got it. And I guess the other question I had was there's a lot of improvements here that are proposed. And we see the community outreach process as sort of prioritization of like what's important. Do we have any sort of default priorities that we think based upon the feedback that we've received so far that we can sort of use as a straw man to then get the public feedback around that? Because I guess it's sort of like it's allowing people to like sort of say this one particular thing is important to me, but not necessarily like saying like these are the top priority projects. Like, do you just disagree? Or I guess it's kind of a statement and a question.
And
I can answer that.
Yeah, Michael.
So we have a lot of roads in Burlingame to begin with that we're considering. They're all important to us. A lot of them are priorities. And as far as choosing a few to be, the straw man, that's kind of what we've done. The study corridors, which we might refine to, more detailed studied corridors. If you go through that list, you'll see they are the major roadways through Burlingame that we're looking to change. And we have looked at them in more detail. And through the tour, they're going to first go through those 10 or 12 locations. By the time they get to the survey, they've already weighed in on it, and they might remember maybe 2 or 3 of them that they'll put to the top, and that would be great, actually.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I mean, but I guess the question is like, does it have are they explicitly stack ranked anywhere? Because I don't know that I necessarily saw that.
No, right now they're kind of ordered in general from traveling northbound.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Otto, do you want to go into more detail about their ordering?
Yeah, the ordering, let's see. So starting with Rollins and moving, down to Murchison. I mean, we're basically doing a U of the city, because we start here, and then I believe, let's see. I know we try to like make it to where you are like looking at each corridor based on your like a kind of how you would move throughout the city. We try to do that as best as we could, but there's a lot of, basically it's the question of, well, do you go east, west first, or north, south? But I wouldn't say there's any particular order to these that like would make it indicative of how important one is over the other. It's the fact that we're highlighting these, dozen corridors, I think speaks to their importance within itself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking from like a practical perspective that we're likely going to need to be doing this in stages. And so there's like a stack ranking element that has to take place. And I guess the other thing that I'm thinking about it, in addition to that, is the stack ranking almost needs to happen at a sort of what is like the minimum viable system that we can move forward with. And then like what are like the incremental pieces that we would want to add to that system going forward to ensure that we don't at some point get stuck with a set of bike or of some bikes facilities that don't lead to anywhere. but I think that that's like one of the outcomes that we should probably hope to achieve at the end of this this public process, is sort of like that, like alignment around this is the order of operations in which we want to proceed with these projects.
I see. Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I think, so we're looking at it, I think you're looking at it from, I believe the way that you're describing the stack ranking is based on directionality, if you will. Whereas the survey that we've provided at the end, and kind of the next phase of this project, which is finalizing recommendations and moving into prioritization, we're prioritizing different factors and how these projects rank within those different factors or buckets, if you will. So how does one project rank in accessibility and connectivity and feasibility? And there's a lot of other kind of factors within those categories. So once we have that, once we run all these projects through that program, basically, we'll have that breakdown of which projects are short-term and can be done right away because they are feasible and cost efficient, or which projects are kind of long-term and, you know, the city should not necessarily shelf, but maybe think more strategically about how to implement them, or some that are just really low-hanging fruit. So that's kind of how we're as a consultant group and as a group who's experienced in doing these projects throughout the peninsula as well, how we have approached prioritizing projects.
Got it. So it's like, yeah, I guess the thing is, at the end of the day, California is the most important piece, but it's also probably one of the most expensive pieces.
Right.
And so I guess you're thinking about it from like quick wins that can be done cheaply, and then moving out to to things that are more strategic and long term.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, this isn't to say, basically what we want to, what would be beneficial to the city from our, like what we could do to kind of help the city out is not necessarily to give you a list of 1 through 100 of all these projects and start, you know, kind of checking them off one by one, starting from the top down. It's really like what we'd like to do is provide you projects within the 4 buckets, 4 categories based on short-term projects, low-cost projects, long-term projects, or some that just are like more complex. And the prioritization, like basically how we break that down, isn't finalized yet because we really want to get the public's input from the survey. But the goal here would be to give the city projects that fit within each category, so that when, you know, that opportunity pops up for a low hanging fruit project, you have your list right there of 1 through 12, for example. Or when it's, you know, if you want to apply for a grant for one of these like really expensive projects, you know, possibly California, you have that breakdown of the order that it should go in.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think I assume that this is probably like a new sort of virtual open house that you haven't necessarily gone through multiple times in the past, or has this been an accessory to in-person meetings in the past, and now it's sort of becoming the sort of the main event?
It's the new norm. Yeah, no, we have, that's a great question. We have done this in the past in you know, other cities and for other projects. You know, I guess it depends on the climate of virtual versus in person for that type of for a specific community. So it's really dependent on, you know, kind of what the city wants and what we feel has worked best in that particular community. You you know, we have done this before, like this, I wouldn't say this exact open house, but something really similar in Portland, throughout the county and you know, other like LA and other municipalities, and it's worked really well. I can speak, I guess you know, kind of speaking ahead, I feel confident of how this is going to work for the city because we have seen 1,000 comments that have come in through the website throughout this plan. To give you an example, you know, I'm also doing work in the Central Valley, and folks there, and what we've noticed is in some of these communities, they're not so, you know, likely to use virtual engagement. And we've provided them these opportunities, but, you know, the city there said like, no, let's just kind of wait until things normalize, quote unquote, and go back and meet people in person. But in Burlingame and many communities along the peninsula, we've had really great success in doing this kind of virtual tour.
Cool. And that sort of anticipated the next question I had was like, what are the factors that cause it to be successful in certain communities, and what are the factors that, and I guess the other question is like, what as a city should we be doing to ensure that it's as successful as possible?
Yeah, great question. I mean, from the get-go, like the most obvious thing is really putting this out there through any kind of social media or virtual outlet that you have. Burlingame has an awesome newsletter. You know, there's Facebook, there's Nextdoor. So that's one element. That element is very, like, that's successful really depending on the type of community. Some communities, you know, just not really many people are going on the city social media page, for example. So that's one. The next thing it would be to really engage your stakeholders and get them to push this out as well and to talk to their constituent groups. And so we, you know, we've been working with you and with the BPAC and with Public Works and other groups as well to try to get this out. So that's another element of this. And lastly, I think, and this, you know, sometimes can be kind of overseen, is breaking down the information that you're presenting into kind of simple terms, right? Like sometimes as planners or engineers, we feel the need to like just bombard with details and metrics and all this stuff, and you kind of lose people doing that. So you know, we worked really diligently on this virtual workshop to try to break down some of those barriers, so that we're just kind of putting things in blank terms while being as kind of transparent as possible.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I think, you know, one of the beauties is this allows sort of like an asynchronous open house. Is it anticipated that we'll also supplement with a more sort of like live question answer type session at some point through the process, so that people who may not necessarily be grokking some of the terms can like get clarification?
Currently, that's not part of this plan. The plan is to show this open house and to, rather than have people show up to at one moment in time, you know, kind of a formal presentation, we're bringing the presentation to kind of a 2-week-long span. So it's not currently we don't have that planned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's potentially, I think that asynchronous is great because then people can do it at their convenience. I also think that there's a little bit of like a forcing function that having like a set date and time. And I think that there's potentially segments of the population that may not be as like, you know, as willing to like go and like, and click on things as being sort of like walked through and then like raising their hands and stuff like that. So I guess it's just like an idea that I'd like to throw out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. That's all I had.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Bush. Commissioner Launder, would you like to ask questions?
As soon as I figure out how to unmute myself.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. Darn. Yeah, I was just listening to the previous commissioners of Bush and Martos, and I share some of the same concerns. There's lots of information, a lot to digest. You know, I think people are going to be, at least I was kind of overwhelmed with all of it, but so it's so much detail and so much things to go through. But I think in the end, people have 2 weeks, and so that's probably enough time that you're going to get whoever wants to be gotten, they'll be getted. So I think, you know, that should be enough time. One thing I would like to mention is that there is a current call for projects right now from the Transportation Authority. That is, I think it went out on August 7th, and I think the submission date is August or September 13th. And so if there was something that we could apply for, it would be great if this was, you know, already signed, sealed, and delivered, but it's at least going to be a long ways along that we could still perhaps apply for something. That's just something I want to make everybody aware of, that there is a current call, and that they're usually 2-year calls, so it'll be 2 years before we have another opportunity for, at least from the Transportation Authority. I can't remember exactly how much money there was involved, but it's always good to get something. And then one other, the BPAC, Burlingame BPAC, has a list of some what they call the you know, ready early action projects. So perhaps there's something in there that is also in the bike head master plan that we could apply for, something like that. But I know everything is moving so fast, and yet we're in a world that's changing so even more rapidly. So it's difficult for sure. What else? But I do share the comments of a lot of data and the layering tool that Commissioner Martos mentioned. One little thing I noticed, and maybe you can get some clarification, is you said there was like 26 some miles of existing bike facilities and 27 miles of improvements. And then one slide said there's going to be a total of 42 total. So I'm assuming that it's not just a mathematical error, but there's some overlap to existing and improving, and you're not double counting. And so if that's the case, just let me know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can double check that to see what the complete network is with existing and recommended, and kind of removing the any overlap.
Okay.
But yeah, and every time we do this, we make sure to not double count. So it's not just here's what you have, here's a recommending, add those two together and you get your total. It's
right.
Getting rid of the overlap.
Yeah, that's the first thing I do, is add up the two numbers and then see if there's anything that differs somewhere else. I saw that, but I figured that it was an overlap, so I just wanted to make sure that was the case. And Otto, I appreciate the presentation. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I'm really, really anxious to see the response from the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Launder. Vice Chair Wetton, you are up.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I moved to try and eliminate the background noise. So I really only have one question, and that is, it's not necessarily fair, because obviously in COVID conditions, this is our sort of best option is to do this virtual open house. But I wanted to ask, has any thought been put into how to make sure you're getting input from segments of the population who may be less likely to go on a virtual open house, who may nevertheless be heavy users of pedestrian and bicycle facilities? So in particular, I'm thinking of the school age population. I think about, when we look at these plans, I think about my daughter a lot, who's starting high school, and the routes to VHS. I wonder if high school kids are likely to get on this and give feedback. And I wonder if there's a way to solicit it, or maybe do some targeted outreach to make sure you're getting their view of it. And I should extend that down to middle school kids who also might in a future world bike to school again. And then senior citizens would be another one who in particular may be heavy users of the pedestrian facilities, but may be a little less likely to get on to this virtual open house. And there might be other groups that I'm not thinking of here, but I wonder if you've given any thought to targeting groups like that who just may not be likely to get on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely one that's, difficult to address, being that we're constrained to just the virtual realm. But I guess to go back to what has led us to this point, we're deep into our outreach phase or component of this project. And we've worked with there's a member of the BPAC who's also really tied into the school, and I believe he's the Safe Routes to School coordinator. And so he was actually, yeah. And so he was actually able to hand out some surveys and do like a really, really neat engagement activity with school children. I believe it was BIS, and where they drew their favorite routes to bike or walk to school. And so that's an example of kind of like what's led us here. So we have engaged with a lot of these different groups leading up to this point. We've also collected a lot of emails and a lot of contact information for people as we've gone along. And so once we're ready to send this out, we'll be tapping into that list as well. But the difficult part of, I guess the tough part that I'm really not addressing is, how can we guarantee that? And it's hard because, at the beginning of this project, we really wanted to focus on going to where people are. And so we went to the farmer's market, we had a workshop, at the community center. And that kind of helps us with that crowd and people who just, aren't likely to be online. But unfortunately now we're really kind of limited to that. So I guess to answer your question, we have engaged with some of those populations, and our hope is that we can continue to engage with them with this open house, but fortunately there's no guarantees.
Well, one thing I would encourage, you mentioned getting on the City of Burlingame newsletter. So I would encourage to see if there's a newsletter or an announcement you can get on through either the Burlingame School District or even better, the Burlingame High School community. Because I think, once you get into the high school, you have a lot more bike riders, and they're probably not logging on to this. So, two of your study routes are Oak Grove and Carmelita, and I don't know if Broadway, I have to look, but I don't know if Broadway was a study route, but those routes across Burlingame are the ways that kids biking to school will get to BHS. And I think, I hate to say regardless of the input, but especially if we're not getting a lot of input through this vehicle, from the high school community. I think it's something, maybe there are pockets of this where we need to seek out input. I think it's important to know how kids would try and get to high school. And if they're not going to tell you through the virtual open house, you may need to affirmatively ask or find some, a focus group of kids who will help you with that. The way Mr. Hopewell did with BIS, which I think was a great exercise, but I don't know that we've done it with BHS. Likewise with seniors, maybe there's a way to focus group or, downtown seniors or identify downtown seniors through different civic organizations where you can get a sample of 5 or 10, or actively walk them through it and get some feedback where maybe you're not getting as much. So that's my only comment. It's a very I think it's a very well constructed tool, and I appreciate the creativity in responding to the crisis. And like I said, my question's a little unfair because this is your best this is your best option here. But I think it would be great to make sure. It may be the unfortunate case that some of the heaviest users of bike and pedestrian facilities might be the lightest users of virtual open houses. So there may be some effort to counteract that would be helpful.
Okay.
So, that's all I had.
All right, thank you very much. So as you were speaking, I was smiling because that's exactly word for word. One of my three issues is that, I mean, I think we have to be careful that that the number of participants that we get may be very low. If I recall, you know, it wasn't super high even for the first outreach. When you think of how many residents we have here in Burlingame, and I just want to be sure that those who are responding are not skewed to a certain skewing the overall project to a certain degree. I'm sure that our adult cyclists, who are a very, you know, robust group, are probably going to respond and take the time to study this. But my concerns are also those that we may be leaving behind, like the elderly, our senior citizens, and school age groups. And so it would be great if we could reach out to the PTAs now that school is starting to get rolling out, saying, hey, you know, to all the elementary schools and to the parents group at the high school, and just specifically reach out to them and let them know that their input at this point is, you know, really important. I even taping up a flyer in, you know, the main doors for North Park apartment complexes, or some of the apartment complexes. We may get some of our apartment renters who may not get the email newsletter or might not otherwise engage, and who are a lot of times they're the ones who are taking public transportation and they are walking to the grocery store. And so I think it's really important to make sure we engage these other important stakeholders. I don't know, you know, how we go about doing that. Those were just some suggestions that were going through my mind. I do think that the time frame, I think 2 weeks is too short. There are parents that are at home all day with their little ones running around and trying to entertain them, trying to work from home. I feel like 3 weeks, we would get a better, it's still short enough that people know there's a deadline. It's not more than a month, you know, it's going to be on their calendar, but it just gives people a little bit more time, because this is a very dense website and survey. I understand that there's a lot to look at and changes that we're contemplating, but it is a lot of information to digest, and somebody's not going to be able to just sit down and do this in 20 minutes when they finally have free time. So I would suggest extending it for 3 weeks if we really want to, you know, have time to get everybody involved. My two other things, one is, you know, we talked about, moving on to another point, we talked about like the bike path that you had going up in the Burlingame Hills off of Truesdale, and we talked briefly about, like, even avid cyclists never go up there unless they're going up there to kill themselves. I think maybe it was Howard who had mentioned that, or someone in the group. So one thing I'd like to think about is, even though it's low hanging fruit, I'm not super excited about painting sharrows all over Burlingame's residential streets, because it's not going to really affect anything in the long run. They're still quiet residential streets. People are either going to use them for biking because they live nearby, or they're not. And even though it may be inexpensive, relatively speaking, to paint, you know, sharrows and devise these paths, we talked about, like, is that really going to change behavior? Like, just because we say these 4 streets are a bike route, does that mean people are going to start using them, like, and they wouldn't have otherwise? So you know, maybe that money would be better held on to and spent on California, where we really think that, you know, we have a chance to make a big change and a lot more progress. So I just wanted to, I want to keep that in mind. And finally, my one concern about the Oak Grove and discussing everything about Oak Grove is that we were talking with Mr. Wong just recently, just prior to COVID, about that being one of the worst intersections for cars in the entire, and pedestrians and cyclists in the entire city. And we had talked about revamping that entire intersection. So I don't know if we're going to put in a light or something that at that intersection, we should make sure that these things jive and meld, and our efforts are not, you know, we're not going to be undoing something that we do a year later or something like that. Mr. Wong or Otto, do you any comments at all?
For that particular intersection, I believe you're talking about Oak Grove, Carolyn. And you have, in fairness, you haven't gotten on there. If you click on there, it does indicate that we are looking at a signal. We are working on designing a signal at that intersection. So that is one of the comments in there.
Okay.
That we included. And as far as your other question about, I think that I can answer is extending it. We'll check into that. I think we were trying to match this up with getting it to council, but let me check on that and we'll see if that's something we can accommodate.
Okay, thanks.
And then I can answer your question about Sharrows not being effective, or sorry, that's just what I wrote down in my notes. That's my paraphrasing. You know, your concern about, yeah, is adding, you know, an extensive network. Well, I guess in this case, let me clarify that our network is of bicycle boulevards, which are different than Sharrows. And the main difference is these are roadways where traffic calming elements would be implemented to make it safer, more comfortable for cyclists to share the road with vehicles. To speak, I think what you were getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, adding this network might dilute some of the more important or more imperative projects such as California. And the next phase of this analysis is to prioritize all of these projects in a way that gives the city a playbook of how to best implement these, you know, from now until, you know, 20 years, 15, 20 years from now. And so if there is a recommendation that, you know, isn't as effective for XYZ, that would really shake out in that prioritization process. And you would see it really ranked low in one of certain categories. But, you know, we also don't want to exclude that right now. You know, we hope that this plan is visionary and it kind of gets as many projects as we can on here, as many projects as are feasible, with the understanding that once we do that prioritization process, you'll have a better understanding of honestly which ones should be built before others.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry if that came across as more global than I meant. I meant specifically putting Sharrows up and these super steep, small, you know, residential streets up on the northwest corner, if that was really worthwhile doing. So not, I just don't, I want to clarify, I didn't mean putting Sharrows in other places. So, but that's good to know. Thank you. Okay, it's hard for me to see with the screen share screening layout. Are there any public comments, Lily, that that you see, or has anyone received an email while we've been discussing this that we need to address?
Yes, we have one.
Okay.
Okay, it's from Madeline Franchetti. It says, good evening. There are several sections of the latest bike ped master plan, like California Drive, where different options are being studied. While I'm happy to see bike lanes along most of the California Drive corridors, I'm disappointed that many of the alternative options listed pit traffic lane removal against parking removal, without any context as to why both can't be done. California Drive, south of Broadway, doesn't need 4 lanes of traffic. And if we're being honest with ourselves, the northbound parking should have been repurposed into a protected bike lane years ago. Unless, of course, you are a fan of public roads being used to store people's private property for free. This update is once in a decade, actually like only update for a few decades. And so I have a few lenses for you to review this updated plan with. Number one, for high traffic roads, does the suggested bicycle facility prevent drivers from driving, stopping, or parking in the bike lane? Number two, if a bicycle facility requires police enforcement to keep it clear of drivers and other hazards, that's a failure. It's 2020, read the room. Safer streets aren't safe for everyone if it means increased policing. Number three, Lynn incorrectly stated at a Teaspoon meeting a couple months back that most people who bike in Burlingame are children, which of course is not true. Bicycle facilities aren't just for children of Burlingame to use recreationally. Many folks bike as their sole means of transportation. Yes, we exist. And if Burlingame was serious about streets that are safe enough for children, well, then we would probably be enjoying those benefits by now. Warm regards, Madeline.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
That is the only one.
Great. 1 second. Miss Beatty, I think Miss Beatty has raised her hand or also would like to comment at this time. Is that correct, Miss Beatty?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I just wanted to give the report from BPAC because we did discuss this in our meeting earlier. And so, sorry. So we had, someone should really discipline my children. We had good talk beforehand. And so we had in mind, we did our own prioritization, just knowing how big and comprehensive the plan was. I think what we really liked about it was it did a really good job identifying a distributed network of low stress bike facilities, and that felt really important to us, and we felt like it checked a lot of boxes in terms of that. We are in particular interested in the idea of bicycle boulevards. So we, when we focused our feedback, we really focused it around California Drive, sort of the same direction some of you went on the stretch between Broadway and the roundabout. But we also are really interested in implementing one of the bike boulevards, and we were interested in implementing it on Laguna Ave specifically, because the residents there have raised their hands a few times now and asked for calming and other features that would make that street more bike and ped friendly. And so we like the idea of sort of, you know, for moving the direction of bike boulevards of starting with Laguna Ave. We also are focused on the other sort of traffic calming on the other networks of Oak Grove, Carmelita, and Cortez. And we're also interested in Truesdale and Murchison, the lower sections of them between El Camino Real and the schools that they reach up to. And so we were interested in bike facilities on those. Our pedestrian projects are a little bit more, they're more crossing focused, as you might imagine. And so we have a list of those as well. But we're also interested in really implementing standards that allow us to upgrade our pedestrian facilities as things get repaved, things like that, so that we are adding what we view as some, you know, missing crosswalks or missing safety features for our pedestrians as they're crossing roads. That's all.
Well, thank you very much. It sounds like I think we're all pretty much on the same path as what you guys were discussing, it sounds like. Thank you. And I thought it was pretty funny to see a little hand come in, Zoom bombed. Okay. I think at this point then, Are there any final comments? Mr. Wong, I think this was more of a informational presentation and not something that we're to take action on tonight as a council, so.
Yeah, and those comments are great, both from the BPAC and the Teaspoon. And just for Commissioner Honor, we are aware that the TA does have the Bike Ped Master grant coming up. We were on the call for projects, and we will see what we can maybe squeeze out of some of this. That some things are already rising to the top, and they've been rising to the top. So
right.
We can see if we can use some of that.
Great, that'd be great, because we don't necessarily have to have an approved bike plan to apply for one of these projects. So I think even to say that we're this far down the line, it might even count the same as having an approved bike plan. So I think not having it is not.
It's yeah.
Great.
Don't worry. We're as staff, we're going to look at that next week.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I'm looking forward to spending more time with the website and playing around with the features. Let's move on then to item 6C, Burlingame Ave and Broadway Street closure pilot programs update. I'm really looking forward to hearing about this.
It may be pretty quick, but we'll I put together just a little talking points. So again, this will be a quick update. We've had a few meetings with the economic subcommittee since our last one, as well as council had some meetings, but actually they didn't. I'm sorry. We've been speaking with them, but so just in general, the update on street closures, originally September 30th was the cutoff date, but obviously with the most recent county or state orders, where that's probably that date's, we're going to shoot past it. There's no end date or future date on when it will change, because everything's changing as data comes out. So, but that September 30th date is probably, and council will discuss this on Monday. It's not going to hold. Some of the things that have changed though, previously Burlingame Avenue started at Friday to Sunday, started at 8 a.m. Friday and went to 10 p.m. on Sunday. We've had some difficulty with that one. Folks have been out there a lot. So the economic subcommittee a couple weeks ago said, let's reduce it. So they've reduced it from, they basically dropped Friday. So the days match Broadway. Broadway continues to be from 4 p.m. on Saturday to 10 p.m. on Sunday, but Burlingame Avenue is now 10 on Saturday, starting at 8 a.m. on Saturday, going to 10 p.m. on Sunday. A lot of folks just weren't complying, and we got calls from both merchants concerned about that, because some folks might not come to their business because there was too many folks out there. So, and we'll discuss this, but this may change as well, because on Monday, council is going to discuss potentially reopening Burlingame Avenue and using parklets. Because of the new order, restaurants, they can only have dine out options on the weekends. And so now during the weeks, they're having some difficulties. So let's quickly go over the parklets that we talked about last meeting. These were on the side streets. These are kind of our best guess at the time of how many locations there were. Of that, here are most of the businesses that are entertaining it, are using it. So I think previously we thought we were going to lose, it's about half the businesses. Previously we thought we were going to lose about, I think I listed here 60, we were going to lose 63 spaces. And right now it's 31, but as it goes on, you can see there's about 3 in progress. And I think we're going to lose 6 spaces total of those. So we'll probably lose 37 spaces out there just on the side streets.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, is there a way to make that chart bigger? Maybe it's just me, but I don't think that's legible.
Yeah, let me see.
On my
It would be helpful to be,
sorry.
I'm like, got my reading glasses on and I'm like,
sorry, this was.
Thank you.
Let me try one more time. I'll shift it up. So
Much better.
I'll let you take a look and then we'll.
So
move on.
Mr. Wong, are the X's
are-
status mean they're not interested and not
No,
engaged?
I'm sorry, they are interested. Those are ones, and as you can see, those are the spaces lost because of the parklet. Sorry.
So really, there are very few places that are not taking advantage of this.
Correct. And again, these are the streets off of Burlingame Ave. And
Can I ask one more question, Mr.
Sure.
Wong? That you mentioned
Absolutely.
just before this, you said because of the new county mandates, takeout and dining outside, you said something about only on the weekends.
oh,
What
sorry.
is,
Right now, the only options are takeout and dining outside. So with that,
Okay.
during the week, the businesses can only do takeout. They aren't able to do any dining. And so hence the use of the parklets, where they can have the ability to dine outdoors during the week as well. So that's the change, because with the closure, they were able to put their tables out and they could do it only on the weekends, but that was because they were able to have some dine-in on the weekdays, which is no longer allowed.
So I had one quick,
Sorry. Yes.
if I could, through the chair. Has there been anything defined as what's the maximum number of spaces we might have parklets in? Or is it just sort of left open and whoever wants one can ask for it?
So when we went out there, we tried to make it fair for each business, regardless of their frontage. So everyone roughly had the same space. And there's no limit to how many parklets we can have. We haven't talked about that, but let me go over the next couple slides and I'll give you at least an idea of how many spaces will be lost in inventory with parklets.
And then once you sign up for one, you sort of have to keep it for the whole duration of parklet time.
Yes, and I think they're going to discuss this more on Monday. We discussed with the Economic Subcommittee is that you need to use it, because the last thing is if it sits there and it's just a bunch of barricades, we will have the ability and we will pick it up, because
right.
It's not just revenue, but it's people accessing downtown.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Sorry. So these next few slides kind of are our estimate of the parklets along Burlingame Avenue, starting on California Drive. You've got, we're trying to do one parklet per business. And again, it doesn't always fall right along their frontage. Some, and especially this end, we've got a lot of restaurants, so we're not able to accommodate them all in the existing parking spaces. Some might have to go on the side streets. It's tough here on California because we aren't having parklets on California, but we're trying to keep everything on the avenue or the side streets. Here's the next block, the 1200 block. You can see on the south side, quite a few, and there's only Copenhagen on the north side. And roughly, because these are parallel parking spaces, each green box represents 2 spaces, 2 on-street spaces that are being lost. Again, moving to 1300 block, you can see kind of the spread. Quickly go through this and give you the big numbers at the end. 1400 block. And then lastly, the 1400 block by El Camino. So what we're looking here is a total loss. If this is kind of the worst case, if all these businesses were to request parklets, we're looking at just a loss of 56 spaces and add that to the 30. So we're looking at roughly 90 spaces being lost. So, but again, that's kind of the worst case scenario. But again, it's providing some relief to the businesses because right now they're not able to have, they can't dine in right now. So you have to do takeout. So that is kind of the update. Again, council will be discussing this on Monday night, as well as some of the other options, the non-food related businesses. So if you have some questions, I can try to answer.
Mr. Wong?
Yes.
Just curious. I mean, there are sadly some businesses on Burlingame Ave that have already gone under or closed permanently. So I'm just curious. Lot A, that's the employee lot across El Camino. It's Lot A, right?
Lot H.
A.
H. H is in
Oh,
Harry.
H. Okay. So, like, I'm just curious. Are we gaining some parking spots because we have lost employees that are parking for
That's a
businesses?
great question. I'll take a look at that. I know the other areas there is parking capacity in Lot C, definitely Lot A over by the library. Whenever I come in, I'll take a look, poke my head through those. And Lot C is usually that's the one behind Copenhagen. For any of you guys pre-COVID, if you've ever tried to go in there, that's one of the ones it's probably full. So
Okay.
Again, so.
And it will be interesting to see how that may change as the weather. I mean, it's been absolutely beautiful weather, and when it starts to get cold and dark and rainy, well, then we may not be dining outside anyway, unless we have tents. But that'll be interesting to see. Anybody else with questions? You can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself. Vice Chair Wetton.
Hi. So one question, I think this is one I've been asking for the past few meetings, is there any feedback from the Burlingame, from the downtown, from the DBID or the Chamber of Commerce on the impact on their takeout businesses from shutting down the Ave? Has they given any feedback on that?
Through the chair, they haven't had any feedback on that. I think more the feedback that DBID's been giving us is more through the retailers. We're having a little rough time with the closure. That's some of the feedback we've been getting, and we've gotten through DBID.
Just to clarify, the retailers are having a rough time with closing the Ave?
With the closure on the avenue.
Can you elaborate on that? Or
both because of access as well as and again, this goes back to folks maybe eating without groups getting together without masks and by the restaurants, and folks, the adjacent business folks, maybe like I think I'm gonna avoid it, that type of feedback.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, because there's a lot of, there's one thing that I've observed is with the closures, there are a lot of people on the Ave. So the other question I had is, are we observing any parking constraints? We're now down 2 lots, both lots south of Howard are gone. We're closing the Ave. Obviously, conditions are very, very different. So I'm just curious, what are the observations on parking constraints? Are we running into any real parking constraints given the closure, or are we doing okay?
Again, based on the observations when I popped in, there's space, right? In some of the previously over or at capacity lots, there's space. I pulled in around lunchtime today and had actually met them over and off of Howard, and there was parking all along Howard. But I mean, in respect to that, there were people dining outside as well. So it wasn't like it was a ghost town and there was plenty of parking. It's probably not as busy as it was on some of the streets, but it's definitely not empty.
When I've gone downtown, I've noticed, like, I've parked on W a few times, the new short-term lot. And I will say there seems to be space. And if someone's trying to get down to the core, you have to know to go there. If you're not from Burlingame, you may not know to go there. But I will say, it's a fairly spacious lot in the middle of everything, and it seems to always have space. So one observation I'll leave you with is, I did get takeout a couple weeks ago. There were tons of people on the Ave. The one thing I would note is that the restaurants do not
they've closed their back doors. I mean, there was one, you know, I heard it said that, well, maybe they'll serve food out their back doors. And what I found is the restaurants actually have closed their back doors, which, you know, my view of it was I did not want to be on the Ave in the crowd. I would have been happy to give money to the restaurant, give them business, and not actually add to the crowd. But I was unable to do that. I was given no choice. I had to park, you know, in a lot and then walk down the Ave and add to the numbers to get the food, when I could have easily gone to the back door, not gotten near anybody, and given the restaurant the same business. So I guess I would continue, and I'll stop with this. I mean, I would continue to press to engage with the restaurants downtown as we do this, to make sure a big part of their business is takeout. And I want to make sure for their sake that it's not hard for them to get the takeout food out to their customers. You know, I've at least noted 1 or 2 instances where we've DoorDashed from Burlingame Ave. It took a long time, and it made me wonder how the DoorDashers, you know, it's probably they've got to park somewhere and get to the restaurant, get back. So for the restaurant's sake, I'm concerned about it, and I'm concerned about it from a public health standpoint, which is, why are we forcing people onto the Ave when we don't necessarily, there's ways to get the food out, you know, not on the Ave.
And through the chair and during our discussions, or the discussions, one of the things that came up, and maybe this is a reaction to that, is some of the businesses with those were concerned about people using the restrooms and not using the restaurant, because, and so that may be a reaction of why they closed the back, because I mean, a lot of those back, like I know Copenhagen's restrooms right off that back.
Right. I think that's accurate, because I actually asked the restaurant, like, why didn't you just serve this out the back door? And they said, well, we don't want anyone coming through. And I think they worry about cut throughs.
Yeah.
And I think they worry about restrooms. But, you know, there are ways to address that. It's a valid concern, but I think there are ways to address it. And like I said, if we can encourage people to give these restaurants business without adding to a crowd on the Ave, especially at dinner hour, it's not helping the retailers much anyway. A lot of them are closed. I think it would be really worthwhile to engage them about that.
Okay.
Mr. Wong, you had said that because there were so many people on the Ave, they dropped Friday. Did I understand you correctly? That was due to the numbers, or I missed that part of the.
I think it was there was concern that folks weren't. We were getting a lot of press and bad press of folks coming down the avenue, and it was no different than any other, like a closure that we would normally have. And so we wanted to trying to discourage that, I believe is what the economic subcommittee was trying to achieve with that we got folks coming in there, and it was not good, because we were becoming a destination, which that wasn't the goal. The goal was to provide space for the restaurants and people to be able to move around during this time. And it became because other cities that they were closing, people were coming to Burlingame. So it was a reaction to that.
That's right. I think I remember. And that's why we dropped the Friday, right? Is that correct? Okay. I have another question. And is Mayor Beach still on? Okay. Hey. So one thing I don't know, this really falls under our realm, but we are talking about parklets. So one of my concerns is that I have noticed that most of the restaurants now set up tables on both sides of that sidewalk, which means that a pedestrian, this is on the days when the street is not closed. So a pedestrian walking down the sidewalk on Burlingame Avenue really only has maybe 4 feet tops to walk down, with unmasked diners on either side, which is totally not what San Mateo County has asked us to do. Other restaurants do have just one line of tables, and therefore the whole rest of the expanse of the sidewalk is available. And that concerns me just as a physician from a public health standpoint. It's almost like you're running a gauntlet. And I don't think that that is what was intended. So perhaps when we have parklets that are more permanent, that will solve the issue. But I do think that we need to ensure that there is at least 6 feet for one person who's walking in a certain direction to be able to space themselves away from unmasked diners that are sitting right there. I was just in the marina having dinner with my 2 sons, and they don't have any sidewalk setups. They have only parklets, which is ideal because it really, forces that spacing. Is the city concerned about that? Have the commissioners been talking about that?
So maybe I can, through the chair, the permit that we currently have didn't expand for those restaurants that had a permit to operate on the sidewalks. The permit didn't allow them more space on the sidewalk. So that's something we'll take a look at because it was only allowing them to go into the street in the parklets or the parking space areas during the closure. Yeah, it specifically says they need to continue to maintain ADA access through there. So that's something and it's a tough one that we have to keep enforcing because we don't have folks going out there all the time. But we're working on it. PD's been going out there for some other issues. So we'll see how we can work that. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't, I think it's great to lend support to our local business, but it still has to be within the framework that San Mateo County health officials have devised, and it's just I'd say at least 50% of the restaurants are setting up 2 rows of tables, and that doesn't allow for safe passage without stepping into the street to get by. So I just want to point that out. Okay. All right. Any public comments on this issue? Or I see Commissioner Bush.
Sorry, I had one final comment. Or a question. You mentioned that the retail businesses were not doing as well. That's sort of like contrary to my sort of what I would have expected. Is there additional sort of rationale for why that might be?
Rationale on why the businesses aren't doing?
Yeah, why the retail businesses are not doing as well.
And that's just the feedback. I mean, obviously we're not looking at numbers, but we've gotten a lot of comments through our website as well as the DBID. They did a survey, and it was roughly 30% of the retailer, or 30% of the businesses, most of them being retailers that were commenting on the survey, indicated that they weren't happy with it.
Is it possible for them to tease out the differences between loss of business because everyone's shopping online, Amazon and using the internet to shop more, as opposed to, I mean, it's pretty hard to tease out those 2 confounding factors.
Yeah, I could ask, but the survey wasn't, the survey was just more general questions, and then, check this or this, and then provide a little feedback. And some folks elected to provide some additional feedback, and others didn't. So I'm not sure we can tease that out because that definitely wasn't one of the questions asked. If they were losing, that was their
yeah. I'm not sure that they can even themselves, but I'm sorry, Commissioner Launder.
Yes, thank you. So my 40 years of experience in the retail industry, there's probably lots of reasons why people aren't shopping. And we'll probably never be able to quite figure it out, but I would guess that people want to do what they want to do, which is eating or just walking up and down the avenue, and they don't want to really go into a store and have any extra contact than they really think they need to do. So personally, I view everybody and everything as a possible point of COVID. So I'll walk in the street and risk getting run over before I walk between 2 tables that people are eating. That's just me. And but there's probably a million reasons why people just don't go in to stores in this situation. So I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to find out exactly. But I think a lot of it is just, these are just times that nobody's ever experienced. And they're just, everybody's reluctant to do any more than they just absolutely have to, which is kind of eating and, you know, maybe having a little bit of socialization while you're doing it, but that's about it.
Good point.
My 2 cents worth for.
I think it's 5 cents worth for sure.
Maybe not even half a penny, but anyways, thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments? Any public comments? Okay, so let's move on then to information items. 7A, engineering division reports.
All right. Thank you, Chair Israelite. Just a quick update, Broadway grade separation. The Joint Powers Board or Caltrain, they've, I think they're close. We went through a selection process for the designer, the design team for the final project. I think we've narrowed it down to one firm, but the enlightening thing, as I kind of mentioned last time, it won't be the one we previously used, but this new one, they brought in some ideas that potentially cost savings on the project, as well as reduced impact on our city streets, potentially not closing Broadway with some design changes. So that's huge, but we'll see. That's something we'll see. Well, the JPP is going to further vet. They were kind of excited about those options as well. Lots F and N construction. The construction continues. For the public parking structure, the contractor's working on the 3rd deck. So we've got one more deck to go, and then again, we're looking at spring of 2021 to have this open, and again, that'll help out whatever parking issues we may have at that point. Hoover Elementary, again, we're finalizing, I think I mentioned this last time, this might be a carryover, the path on Easton, trying to work into one of our resurfacing projects on the work. So I need to double check on that one, but that's kind of it for the public works side. We've just got a lot, we've been working a lot on the parklets, and as Commissioner Wander mentioned, there are a few grants that we're working on that we're keeping us pretty busy, so.
Great, thanks. It's time for Sergeant.
I believe Commissioner Wander has a question.
Yeah, I just.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's no problem. I was just concerned what, if anything, is going on with Peninsula and 101. It's sort of, we haven't heard anything for a while on that. I was just curious.
And I haven't myself. I will. That's something we can follow up on.
Yeah, and I was going to mention in the commissioner's comments, because I've had actually a couple of neighbors ask me what was going on. I said, well, I don't know, but I'll try and find out. So
yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Sergeant Perna, it's time for the police department report. You are on.
Hi everyone. So the data you have in front of you on that report is from July. There was a total of 18 accidents reported, 4 injury accidents, 2 of them involved pedestrians, 1 involved a bicycle. The ones highlighted on the form there are the ones that I thought you may be interested in. Those were the 4 injury accidents. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the report, but are there any questions about any of the accidents? Vice Chair Whitten.
Vice Chair Whitten, I think you're still on mute. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Not working. There you go. There you go. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I've lost my screen, so I'm flying blind. I wanted
That's
to.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So I wanted to ask about the accident on Laguna, just because it looked like that's near where it was a bike car collision. I believe it was.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was right before the Broadway closure. I think about maybe a couple hours before the Broadway closure happened. It was right at 3:24, or maybe it was about an hour or two before. But it was a bicyclist was proceeding westbound on Broadway, and like a big rig truck was also on Broadway, and overtook or attempted to overtake the bicyclist, and basically brushed against the bicyclist, causing the bicycle and its rider to fall over.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously the big rig was found at fault, and that by our determination was found at fault.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Through the chair, Sergeant.
Yes,
the vehicle pedestrians, there's 2 of those.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
elaborate on the one, Howard and Lorton?
Yes, so the Howard and Lorton accident, the driver was going northbound on Lorton and was going to turn onto Howard, turn left onto westbound Howard, and a pedestrian, through our investigation, we determined that the pedestrian was crossing the street outside of the crosswalk. The driver had possession of the intersection at that point, and the driver did stop or attempt to stop, but it was just a little bit too late, and the pedestrian was sort of bumped by the car and fell backwards. I'm not sure of the extent of the injuries, but I know they were minor.
Looks like no
Here,
DUIs.
Unmute.
Yeah.
One more. So the other, sorry, the other one on 82 and Howard.
Yeah,
Vehicle pedestrian.
so that accident was actually considered a major accident due to the pedestrian did have some injuries, and let me just make sure I'm reporting accurately on that one. So El Camino on Howard, yeah. So this one, the vehicle was traveling northbound on El Camino in number 1 lane. The pedestrian was crossing the street in the crosswalk eastbound. But according to, through the investigation and witnesses and statements of involved parties, it appears that they were not party 1. Yeah, I think we determined that basically they weren't crossing with the the walk sign. They were crossing against the walk arrow. I think that was determined again through witnesses and such. But the pedestrian was struck by the car, and there was some significant injury, but nothing too serious, I hope.
Sergeant Perna, if a pedestrian is in the crosswalk, but they are crossing when they don't have the walk permission light, is the pedestrian still at fault, or is the driver always at fault? I'm just curious how you guys determine that.
It really, unless there is independent witnesses or, unless the statements match up, it's difficult for us to determine that after the fact. However, just because they're crossing against in my opinion, if I was investigating it, if they were crossing against a red, don't walk sign, but there were no other vehicles present at the time, as soon as they begin walking, they've sort of assumed control of that intersection. This is a big problem. An example would be on Burlingham Avenue at Lorton, where a vehicle may stop at, say, eastbound or westbound Burlingham Avenue at the limit line. They stop, and then it's sort of safe to go. They start to pull forward, and then someone just decides to start crossing the street on the opposite end. That's actually a pedestrian violation because the vehicle has established control of the intersection. They now have the right of way. That saying that pedestrians always have the right of way, that's true, but only when it's safe to do so. I think the increase in pedestrian, traffic and people being at home is because it does seem, I don't have any numbers in front of me, but it does seem that there's been more accidents involving pedestrians. I think as a whole, our accidents are down during this time, the shelter in place time over the past few months. But I do think that the ones that we have had seemed like there has been an increase in pedestrian in pedestrian involved accidents.
Thank you. Thanks. I think that's what it seems like to me too. Any other questions for the sergeant? Okay, let's move on to farmers market, which we're not attending during these COVID times. So then we'll move on to the next topic, Teaspoon Chair and Commissioners Communications. Anybody receive any communications this month? Okay, then let's move on to now item 8, committee and subcommittee reports. I think this, obviously during this unusual changing time, we probably don't have a whole lot of anything going on with anyone with downtown parking subcommittee.
No,
Nothing.
not this month.
No. And Broadway parking, we haven't been working on that. School traffic, nothing. Citywide transportation alternatives, I assume nothing. Okay, all right. So moving on, future agenda items for next month. Mr. Wong, was there anything that I know we were talking about California and Broadway that's still on our list?
We can talk about that potentially. The other one was Oak Grove and Carolyn. I think we promised the commission we'd bring, and I'll see what the status of that one is. Bring the signal design, show you guys what it's been worked on, and then provide you an update on parklets again, but street closures. Ms. Mai may pop in. I think she may want to give you, not discuss it, but give us a quick status, and maybe if that one's ready, we can put it on.
Sure. So in regards to Oak Grove and Carolyn, traffic signal, we're currently finalizing design that will then be submitted and to Caltrain for review, and we're going to vet out some of the concerns that they may have. We're going to do a distance field meeting, social distance field meeting out there. So I do not plan to come before Teaspoon to the commission for a report until we have that vetted out. But for certain, we will have a presentation of what the design will look like.
Great. All right. I think that's probably a fair amount. 2 tricky intersections if you guys are ready and able to present next month, and then just update on the parklet and all of the issues that surround that. Any of the commissioners have anything that you want to add for the future? Okay. All right. I think we will adjourn the meeting then. Little gavel. Everyone be well. Thank you so much.
Well, stay healthy.
All right. Take care.
Yes, you all take care. I miss you guys.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise.
Take care.